Want to get this thing started? Okay, we're going to start by steam doing this thing. Then we'll have people fire off boats, then we'll paddle down the river, okay?
Sure, it's a nice area you've got. I'd like this. This would be a nice hometown creek to have. I was told the water was cold, but it doesn't seem all that cold to me. Maybe it's just that I haven't stuck my face down in it yet. Do is give you some overview of the boats that we have, why they look the way they look, and that way you can start making some decision as to which ones you're interested in talking more about, trying out, or whatever. We have 3 primarily tandem boats and 2 primarily solo boats. I say that with some reservations because people are tandeming the bigger solo boat, and they are soloing all 3 of the tandem boats. Although it wouldn't be my first choice, you can get a little more usage out of the boat in a have-to situation. Like you can't afford all you want just yet, you know, so you kind of have to make do. Back in the old days, the boats that we used for whitewater were basically flatwater boats that we were forcing into whitewater paddling. And flatwater boats were not anywhere close to being as well designed as they are today. Nowadays, a flatwater boat is a pretty fine-tuned, highly specialized piece of equipment. There are some general-purpose boats which do a lot of things well, but nothing to precision. Nothing is taken, you know, to its peak in performance in a general-purpose boat. Then we have whitewater boats that are very finely tuned and designed to handle whitewater technique, and also the designs are built with paddlers in mind. The Indians had pretty nice boats way back. We call them Indians, Native Americans. How about that? Native North Americans had very nice canoes. They were lightweight. They had very good hull designs on them that were produced by trial and error. I doubt if there were many Indian or Native American naval architects back then, but trial and error is a pretty good way of designing things if you've got a couple of thousand years to come up with a good hull. And they did. Then the French got here. Everything went downhill because the French said, what we want to do is instead of being able to take 3 deer hides per person, you know, one to wear, one to give as a gift, and one to trade for a woman when we get to the next tribe, you know, we want to carry back 200 or 300 hides and stuff. So then you get the Voyageur canoes, which were basically waterborne trucks. And that's where the high bows came in. That's not an Indian design. That's a French design to carry a lot of weight in a boat, which the Native Americans didn't do. They wanted very lightweight things, you know. And we kind of suffered with that for a number of years. In the late 1800s, we started seeing some very nice canoes built, a la Rushton and some other people, that had pretty nice hull designs. Naval architecture was starting to filter down into canoes from big ship design, and they were starting to overcome a lot of the prejudices, and the late 1800s was kind of called the golden age of canoeing. No, that wasn't the golden age of canoeing. You know, that was prehistoric canoeing. Today, right now, you guys are the luckiest canoers going because you've got a tremendous selection to choose from. You've got designers competing left and right, both in race designs and recreational designs and play boats. And you guys are getting the best choices in history for canoes. Getting a lot more computer-aided design. We're able to bring prototypes out and production models very quickly so that things don't sit still. They're going to be changing almost as we speak as time goes along. So you're going to see some very nice boats, and you're going to see better ones in the future. Okay? The biggest thing to do in a canoe is decide what you're going to do with it. And that's a tough one because people come to canoeing with all sorts of different ideas. And you have different ideas of flat water, of white water, of family canoeing and things like that. There are kind of 2 views of whitewater. One view is that the whitewater is the stuff you have to survive in order to get back on with your canoe trip. And then the other view is from the other way, that you have to get through the flat water to get to the whitewater, so you have something to play in. Okay, which is, you know, both views are very prevalent. They tend to exist in certain concentrations of the world more. In the Midwest, you tend to see people doing more canoe tripping and a little bit of whitewater. In the Southeast, people do their tripping in their van. They do their paddling in whitewater rivers for the most part. Do a lot of swamping and stuff like that, but it's usually day trips or 2-day trips, things like that. You don't have the luxury of the 2-week Boundary Waters trip like you do in the Midwest. Going. Now this is incredible what you have at your disposal, and I don't understand why there's not 500 people here instead of 50. You know, just because of the resources that you have, and I think that it is because of the lack of a canoeing tradition out here. You know, this was the last frontier and things like that, and we're just now seeing people getting interested in canoeing and the higher levels of canoeing and so on. Whether that level be marathon or Olympic canoeing, family canoeing, or let's all get scared whitewater boating. You know? So it's interesting to watch it develop. And the thing that I'll need to find out from you guys is what you're interested in. Okay? This is a whitewater river, so I'm assuming everybody is at least mildly interested in whitewater here. Is there any special appeal? And you should look around at as many of them as you can, and paddle as many different kinds of boats as you can. You'll find that paddling a flatwater boat makes you a better whitewater paddler. You'll find that paddling a pure whitewater boat will make you a much better flatwater paddler, and so on. I will. I admit to being a threat to myself and others in a kayak, but I do kayak. You know, I usually paddle a slalom boat in gates because it tells me more about boats and paddles in the short time I have available to do it. But and I try to make sure nobody's around with a camera. But yeah, I kayak, and I also paddle a deck canoe, a C1 too, and a little bit of C2. It's hard to find fodder to go with me in a C2, but I enjoy that. I think people are mostly interested in solo whitewater paddling. Come on, get them up. Let's see. Okay. How about tandem? Okay. That's kind of interesting. We see the balance between solo and whitewater paddling kind of shift back and forth. And I kind of feel like that if you've got a good tandem partner, that you've got a very valuable resource. Okay? Tandem boating is one of two things. If you've got a good partner and you guys work together, it's like simultaneous orgasm. If it's not, it's like divorce court. Yeah. And that's the way it goes. I wish it were different, but we have a theory back east that we think that every prospective couple should paddle a whitewater boat together and see just exactly how strong their relationship is. Yeah, we have to do that. The attitude of taking a tandem boat is that your one goal is to make sure that your partner has a good time. If that's your goal, everything else takes care of itself. You'll have a good time too. If that's not your primary goal, then you can get into some things. Let's start, I'll just start with the cruising boat that we have, kind of a day tripper. It's called the Interlude. Way over there. Yeah, you want to drag that one down? We'll just talk about it a little bit. And we'll kind of run through the boat, and then we'll let you guys get in the water as quickly as we can. All right, if you look at this boat, you see a very fine for a plastic boat. Very sharp entry, divides the water well, makes the hole that the boat has to go through. All right, then closes the hole up real nicely. All right, and gets back, regains some of the energy that it used to make the hole. There are two kinds of. It's designed to cover distance. All right, the Interlude was designed with rivers like we have on the coastal plain in the east, and it occurs a lot of places. We call them blackwater rivers. They're very tight, very intimate, fast-flowing, flat rivers. All right, they start up like a little creek. You get in, you're maneuvering a lot. Very fast water, very flat water, but there's a lot of twisting, a lot of turning that's involved. Then you get a lot of feeder creeks in, and they'll open up, go through pasture and farmland and stuff. They just want to cover some distance in. So you need a maneuverable boat. You need a fast boat. Then you'll get into a swamp. The demands that you're placing on a boat. You want to carry enough gear to be able to do a couple of days camping. If you're a good packer, you can extend that to a 10-day or 2-week trip. If you just want to do day tripping, it's great because you can certainly carry that load. You want the maneuverability, you want the speed. So if you look at this hull, you see it's very rounded, very pointed. Okay? Slow this thing back up, please. Okay, it's going to be kind of fun to take this one down this river. It's built with a lot of wave shedding characteristics. If you look at the bow, you'll see how it flares out. That's so when the boat punches into waves, the water is diverted out to the sides instead of rising straight up. That's one of the problems with a boat that doesn't do that. It does kick the water up, but then you paddle under it and catch it with the midship of the boat. Okay? Very small ones. Yeah, these are supposed to have end caps like this. All right? We just don't have them here on this boat. This is one of the early ones, and we shipped some out without deck caps. Apologies for that. One of the things it does give you the opportunity to do, though, is to look at the way the Royal X is expanded in the ends. Back at the shop, we saw, we had the question as to how the boats were molded out of Royal X. And I went through this long technical thing about Royal X being a laminated sheet that you can patch. You can specifically put extra material, whether it's core material, which is the foam in a... And you can look at the ends of the boat. Feel free to compare ours with anybody's and look at the differences. You'll see a lot of extra substrate, which is a solid plastic, on the outside there to take a beating. Okay? On the inside there's not as much because that's not the side that hits rocks. So we save weight and yet give you as much as material as we can to keep the boat holding up and give it a lot of life, longevity. All right? The other thing to consider on a boat like this is whether you can reach the water or not. All right? In a boat that's primarily a touring or day tripper type boat, it gets fairly narrow at the paddling stations, and that's so that you can use a bent shaft paddle, not necessarily a pink one, but a bent shaft paddle, which are typically shorter than a straight shaft, get a good technically correct stroke and still be able to paddle the boat. In the whitewater boats, like the Legend, which is kind of a general purpose boat built for whitewater, I'll pull that one down. Let's slide this one over. You can just pull it over, give yourselves a little room. Yeah, that's good. Okay. This is our Legend. This is kind of that non-existent mythical boat, the boat that does everything well. There are compromises in hull design that you have to make. So we sacrifice a little bit of speed to get a lot of stability. Okay? There's some other tricks that we played with the water lines and the flow characteristics of the hull to make it act like it was a lot longer boat than it really is. This has got a bottle-nosed entry. You hear a lot of times about sharp, fine entries. Okay? And yes, fine entries do have very low form resistance, wave-making resistance, because it knifes through the water. But they also have a lot of wetted surface out there, so it generates a lot of surface drag. You don't really need that little pointy entry because you can trade off a lot of surface drag, okay, for a little bit of form resistance. The entry on this boat is very rounded. It's a bottlenose. All right? Think about the things that go through the water very quickly, dolphins, submarines, torpedoes, and you probably won't be able to think up anything with a real pointy end on it. Okay? Underwater, the pointed end is actually slower. Is that in the ends out here, very rounded. When you do peel outs, is everybody familiar with peel outs, eddy turns, things like that? Anybody not familiar with that? Okay. an eddy, quiet water, where you peel out or pull out into a moving current. Right? You've got a differential current. One end of the boat's in still water, the other end hits the fast water. If you have a pure flat bottom boat that goes into a sharp bilge, which is the edges here, as you pull out into it, those bilges tend to get caught. The water's coming down, it tends to catch that bilge and roll it under if you don't lean downstream hard. So what you try and do is you lean downstream so that the water can't catch that upstream bilge. Well, we've taken that necessity away. You can do it if you want to, but you don't have to on a boat like this because of the rounded nature right here. Now, of course, when you get in super fast water, you still have to transfer your weight downstream, your body weight, but you don't have to lean the boat so much. So you get a better performing boat. You also get a boat that you can lean it according to the wave you're going to hit, not because you're pulling out. Sometimes if you lean downstream, you may be having to lean downstream into a breaking wave, which puts a lot of water in your boat. All right? And that situation is avoided by rounding the bilges up here to give you a lot more forgiving quality. We did have it the bilge kind of sharpened up in the center just to give you that stability. You got a platform here that you can do things on a lake or the water, a river, or whatever magnitude. We've put this thing through Class 4 water, and it's not my first choice for a Class 4 water boat, but it handles it pretty well. Pretty well. It's certainly not as maneuverable as the Dimension, which I think is our next boat that we've got right there. And then we have an extra core patch in the center too. In addition to that, with our selected heat process, we can overexpand the core in the center to give us a much higher sectional modulus. Right? And my understanding is that we're the only ones in the industry that can do that. Nobody else can do that at this point. They have to evenly cook their sheet. And you're playing some pretty tricky games there. It gets into fine tuning. You may only have 5-degree higher temperature here than you do somewhere else. So when you're running in a 300-degree range, you know, it kind of gets tricky to hold things like you're supposed to be. You will get some flexibility in a hull. And a hull that size, there's no way to totally avoid it. But what you do is you keep the boat as light as you can, okay, in the 79, 78 pound range, and expand that core as much as you can to give you as much stiffness as possible. I think you find that the interlude is incredibly stiff. Paddling it, you'll see no oil canning on that one. You can bounce on almost any Royal X hull and get it to do that. Right? The other thing is,
looks like the shape on the interlude is more rounded.
Yeah, it is. Right, it's a shorter radius on the shallow arc hull. All right, a shallow arc is a portion of a circle. Right, and it's not completely a circle, but that's the idea. Right, this is not a flat bottom boat on the Legend either. It's a rounded hull, but it's a much larger radius, a much more gentle curve to it. So that gives us a little bit of an advantage there too. The other thing is that you get what you pay for in Royal X. Okay, if Royal X cost every manufacturer the same amount of money per pound in the blank, right? And it's who has the most waste, who can do the most with what they've got. When you're looking at a less expensive boat, more than likely you're looking at a lower material cost, where you take a blank of a certain size and stretch it over a larger surface area to form the boat you want. Okay, that's not universally true, but it is most of the time. You almost buy these things by weight. All right, it's like the Encore is our least expensive boat. It's our most highly refined design, but it's a smaller piece of plastic. Right, so you're buying fewer apples in the sack. All right, let's this is the Dimension. And I like this boat. I like it a lot. We've paddled this thing, and I just wish that I had more time. I wish I had Jim back east with me so we could paddle tandem in big water, or I could stay out here more often. One of the things that we've found with tandem boats is that everybody wants a small boat. You want something little to handle. But at the same time, you've just got to have enough volume to be able to run the boat dry through big whitewater. You can either slam the thing full of bags, which I think is okay during your developmental stages and stuff, but I think you should be able to run most rapids without needing those bags, whether they're in there or not. Your object is to run this boat dry. So it just takes a certain size boat to do that. And so we sit down and calculated the weight we expected to be in the boat, looked at moments of inertia and lift factors and all sorts of strange things and stability, and I got to design a pure whitewater play boat for tandem boaters, okay? And I've had a blast with it ever since. I'd like everybody that's into tandem paddling to try all the boats and think about what you're going to be doing. If you really want to push yourself in pure whitewater and are not looking at the other things to do in a canoe, definitely try this one. I would not want to take this boat in a swamp unless it was the only boat I have and I just happened to be at the Okefenokee or something, okay? It's still plenty fast, but the thing about it is it spins so quickly. You know, it'll just spin around. It's not a slow hull at all. The problem is that you have to spend a lot of your paddling effort in the corrective strokes, making a boat track. The interlude tracks very well. The Legend tracks well, but has a lot of maneuverability. Right? This one, you make it track. Okay, very maneuverable. And also the rocker curve, and this boat is a very gradual rocker. But if you put a straight edge along the hull, you'll see 6 inches. You'll measure 6 inches under the ends. That's a deceptive way to determine rocker, because rocker is really a very complex curve. I mean, that boat can do all sorts of things before it gets to the end. Some boats do have a hull like that after they're a couple of years old. Right? This is why I show that. I don't think it's intentional. These holes are shaped very well. Part of that's with the design, and part of it is with the plastic and the engineering that goes behind it. But your object here is to have a boat that can carry the weight of 2 people, lift them up over waves and stuff, and still spin anytime you want to. All right? With this boat, you can spin, you can turn, you can't spin. With this boat, you can spin with the water. With this boat, you can spin wherever you want to, however you want to, whatever. All right? What's that?
How do the hull speeds differ?
Okay, hull speed is kind of a deceptive thing too. The Interlude's the world's fastest plastic boat canoe, okay? Regardless of certain advertisements, we know better. This one will outrun the second fastest boat and also outturn it, which is pretty interesting. That's supposed to be a contradiction, and if you have a boat that turns, it's not supposed to be fast, but you can do a lot with a boat. There's your fast hull speed. All right, this one is slightly slower. We won the Southeastern Downriver Championships in a Legend against all the other plastic boats. This boat wasn't on the market at the time, so this is not a slow boat. It also has enough volume in the ends to lift up over waves. We were running a Class 3 river, and we were able to pretty much go where we wanted to go on that one. We didn't have to think very much about whether we were going to take on water. We could just keep the hammer down the whole way through. And that was a tremendous advantage in a race. So as a hull speed, this one is definitely slower than the Interlude. The Interlude has a 32-inch wide, 4-inch water line. And that's a comparison thing. If you sink that boat in the water 4 inches, and measure its width, you'll see it sitting in the water 32 inches. This one is 1.5 inches wider than that, which gives you a lot more stability. All right? So you're looking at a little bit slower boat here. Still a quick boat. I think it compares very favorably with everything except the Interlude as far as speed. The dimension is 32 inches at the 4-inch water line. That is just enough to give you stability for 2 people. It's not more than you need. Sometimes you need to be able to lean a boat. And if you have a too wide a boat, it's very difficult to shift your weight to lean the boat up. You may have a wave breaking on your left, and you may want to roll the boat up to lift the gunnel to keep it drier. A number of things to think of like that. So this boat is the same width as the Interlude, but it has a flattened cross section. all right, to give you that stability. You can sort of run around on the face of waves. You know, you can stay parallel to the surface of the water even if that surface is tilted, and spin the boat and run where you want to go. You don't really want to keep the boat straight up all the time. I've seen a little drawing that's been published in magazines a number of times about boats and how this is wrong with the boat leaning up on the wave and it's right with the boat going straight regardless of what the wave's doing. Wrong. That's not the way to do it. You need to be able to lean your boat when you want to, okay, and spin it. So this is not a slow boat, but at the same time it is the slowest of the three. I think the best thing to do is get you out in them and let you just paddle them, and then you'll see that. And I'll try to get on through to that point pretty fast. Okay. All right. The solo boats, we have two of those. The Caper is a 14.3 solo boat. The Encore is 13 and change. A couple of differences in those boats. When you just look at them, you think that the Encore has a lot more rocker than the Caper does. Well, if you measure it, it's about the same. If you put a straight edge on them, you get the same measurement. The difference is that all of the rocker in the Encore, the change in curvature, is right in the center of the boat. It's where the paddler sits. This gives you a number of advantages. It lifts more of the ends are lifted up out of the water sooner. It does slow the boat down because you're lifting it up, but at the same time it's an 1.5 inches narrower, so you get your speed back. So we kind of balance one thing or the other. Very hot boat, spins well, very fast. You can run it upstream. It feels a little interesting when you first get in it, okay? It takes about 5 minutes of paddling it around before you feel real comfortable with it. Then you find out it's got a lot of reserve stability. There's tumble home in that boat, which is the shape of the boat comes back in to the gunnels. What that does is lets you get a very nice forward paddle stroke. You'll also see tumble home on the Dimension, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is so that you can paddle this boat solo if you want to. It's only 32 inches wide at the gunnels. You know, I'll give you some comparisons. The Caper is 31 at the gunnels. The two primary tandem boats are 35.5 and 36. I believe that a Sunburst is 32, a Whitesell is 35 inches at the gunnels. Emmy, I think, is 33. So you can see the comparisons in the width. With the real narrow boat, you can get a much more correct forward stroke. You're not having to tilt the paddle as much. You can get your torso rotation, get the paddle in the water, and keep it real close to the keel line to make a very powerful stroke. So you can make that boat track. The Caper, if you'll look at it, it starts to flare on the ends and then it cuts in and has very straight center lines on that. That's the same reason. Okay? So you can, it's a bigger boat, it's a much more forgiving boat, it's an easier boat to paddle. And we find that there are a lot of people that like those features. Higher volume, it's a little faster on the straight line, tracks a little easier, although it's extremely maneuverable. You can still snap that boat around anytime you want to. But it's just a bigger, more forgiving, less intense boat, particularly for larger paddlers. We have people, Charlie Walbridge is 6'3", 230 pounds, and really thinks a lot of the Encore. That's what he's paddling now. We have other people that size that just say it's too much boat for them, and they prefer the larger boat, the Caper. I also have some very big people who are paddling the Dimension solo and enjoying it. On the Obed system, you paddle that, Dick, you probably saw several people paddling.
Juanita paddles that all the time.
Yeah. So it's a big boat. You're paddling a 16-foot boat, but the design is such that it actually spins very well. You have the additional swing weight, you know, the weight of the ends further from the pivot point on the boat. But other than that, you still have a good hull design. Okay? Are there any questions before I keep going? Like that, something they're interested in, or weight of the Dimension? We give you a range when we list weights, and I've got that memorized on a piece of paper somewhere, but I don't have it with me. In the mid-60s. You know,
Well, how does it compare with those?
Of weight?
Yeah, is it a whole lot more or not?
Yeah, it's significantly more. You're looking at low 50s on an Encore in wood trim. You're looking at mid to high 50s on a caper, and you're looking at low 60s on a dimension. And the exact, whether it's 61 or 62, I'm not sure of. You will see a variance of around 3 pounds from boat to boat, just simply because of different amounts of stretch in the molding process and layup of the Royal X blank. So it's not a cut and dry thing. You do see variance on anybody's boats. What we did is weighed a bunch of boats, and then gave the range that we saw those boats come in. Okay. Legend is mid-70s. In vinyl trim, it's a little heavier. Vinyl trim is typically 6 or 7 pounds heavier than the wood trim. And that's because inside these vinyl gunnels on the Legend, on all the whitewater boats, any boat supposed to be in whitewater, there's an aluminum channel in there. And so that if you were to pin the boat or something, aluminum has very high tensile strength. And so you mess up, you flip your boat, it's full of water, hits a rock, wraps around it. Well, without that piece of aluminum in there, what you can see sometimes is that you can crack the vinyl and actually start a tear in your boat. Particularly happens a lot on wood trim boats. So I recommend wood trim boats for people who are a little more advanced, paddlers, people with good judgment, people who like to do their own woodworking, or people who are going to be paddling flat water boats. The Interlude in wood is absolutely a gorgeous boat, as they all are, but it's particularly handsome. And that does knock some weight off of it. That aluminum trim is the bomb-proof way to go. If you're still in your developmental stages of paddling, which I still am, then depending upon what you're going to be doing, it might be a good idea to think about the vinyl trim with the aluminum insert. If weight and weight alone is your consideration, then look at the wood trim. Yeah.
Some of the data that we have in the Canoe magazine, like for starboard, the tandem Google,
Yeah.
I think it says like 23 or 25 inches for the bow.
Okay. What they
backing up, adding in the rock?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So is this basically
The Canoe magazine has some pretty strange measurements that they ask for. They're a little outdated. Some of them are a lot outdated. But I think if you look at that closely, it says bow height. So what you're doing is setting a boat on the floor and putting a tape measure on the ends. All right. If you also take that bow height and subtract out the rocker, then you'll see the actual depth on this thing. The dimension is about 17 inches actual depth. It's very flared up there, so you've got a lot of volume. It takes a lot of water to move out of the way before that bow can sink in. Okay, but we keep it low for a couple of reasons. The Legend is also flared out and actually trimmed fairly low for a couple of reasons. And the biggest thing is crosswinds. When you get out on a lake, if you have a real high bow, then it's very difficult to handle the boat. You know, the wind you usually have a point that you want to paddle to, and the wind will be coming at you at some kind of angle. You can adjust your trim, you can adjust your correction strokes and everything, but if the ends of the boat are up too high, it's real easy to just get kicked around and blown all over the place. All right? With the dimension, it's got a pretty interesting cut to the shear line. Those of you who paddle tandem boats know that when you run into waves and stuff, you don't really take water on right over the point of the boat. All right, when you hit, where the stem goes in the water is where the wave that the boat makes is accelerated the most. All right, so if you look at this little high point, the gunnels are cut down and then they kind of dip like that. That high point is right in here. All right, that's your deepest point of the boat, and it's for that reason, because that's really where you need it. At the same time, with a big boat with that much rocker, if we continued that curve on up, well, you'd have a sail on both ends of the boat, and we'd have a lot of trouble paddling it in a crosswind, which doesn't just happen on lakes. A lot of times in whitewater rivers, you'll come around a bend, or in a gorge where your bigger rapids are, and the wind will just be funneled right through there, and it'll really kick up. So a lot of little things. You know, none of these are simple designs. They're pretty complicated, and we've had a lot of input over the years on them.
There's actually advancement over some of the earlier vehicles.
Oh, sure, sure. Well, I hope I'm not through yet, you know. We keep learning, keep getting more input, and the biggest thing is to find out what you guys want to do with the boats. You know, it doesn't really matter so much what experts can do with them, and I qualify that term. You know, X is a has-been and a spurt's a drip under pressure. So it doesn't matter what the expert or the hero or whatever can do with a boat. It matters what you can do with them. So that's why I had so much fun doing this boat. You know, it's kind of thinking back to when that was the kind of paddling I did primarily, and what I wanted out of the boats at that time. Okay. Yeah.
What about rolling the dimension?
Rolling the dimension? I have not personally rolled a dimension. All right, but I have talked to a number of people. You paddle with Dick Connor. He actually claims that the dimension rolls easier than the caper. I have rolled the caper, and the caper is a very easy rolling boat. And as far as rolling, yeah, the Encore is the easiest boat I've ever tried to bring up out of the water. It just kind of slides right back up. The only problem I've had with rolling the Encore is the fact that it's so little, and it offers so little resistance that when you're practicing your roll, a lot of times you can't turn it all the way over. Really, you set up, yeah, you dive under, and you go under, and your life jacket and everything bring you back up on the wrong side. So you paddle under and then paddle yourself over to that side, and then still you sweep and you roll. All right? But it does come up very easily. We'll make Jim roll one up for you in this 50-degree water.
Both symmetrical, so you can set it up solo going the other way?
Yes. Yeah, it is symmetrical. The Legend is symmetrical, the Caper is symmetrical, and so is the Dimension. The Interlude is very asymmetrical, and the Encore is asymmetrical. All right. The symmetrical boats were the first three that we brought out. Right, and we had some constraints, and we felt like we would do all we could, but we didn't want to shock people all at once. Right? In the later boats, we had a little more time to develop them, could work a little longer on them. We actually even did 2 prototypes on the Encore, which we didn't do in any of the others. But yeah, those 2 are asymmetrical and shouldn't be turned around. There's a number of reasons for that. Symmetrical boats can be made faster. I'm sorry, did I say asymmetrical? Asymmetrical is faster. Symmetrical, you have a little drag on one end or the other. The problems of an entry and exit are not the same. One of them you're using mechanical advantage to, the problems of an entry and exit are not the same. One of them you're using mechanical advantage to divide the water, and the other one is a pressure thing. You're trying to maintain pressure over the stern of the boat. And so you have kind of an interesting return on the water depending upon how fast you project the boat to be paddled at. Right? With the Legend, you're not looking at a rocket ship. You're looking at getting as fast a boat as you can that's a good stable platform for canoeing. With the Interlude, you want to cover some ground. So you want a fast boat. The other thing to read when you say fast boat, you don't have to have veins in your teeth and paddle with a pulse rate of 150 for 2.5 hours to enjoy a fast boat. You can also read that as it doesn't take that much effort to paddle a lot slower. So you can be a lot more relaxed and still cover a lot of ground. Okay? Don't paddle with your arms. Your arms are to connect you to the paddle. On a forward stroke, you want to rotate your body forward. All right? Accentuate this until you kind of get the feel. But you're going to rotate that shoulder forward. That way you're reaching forward, you're leaning forward slightly, okay? And you're not using these little muscles here. Some of you guys look like you got some not so little muscles here, but quite frankly, the power that you can generate here is nothing compared to the power you can generate in the rest of your body. All right? So you want to use large muscle groups. So you reach forward, paddle enters the water, and you kind of do it with your torso. Okay? Well, if you know what those terms mean, fine. All you want to think about is keeping the shaft vertical, reaching as far forward with your lower shoulder, and bringing your lower shoulder back as far as you can. All right? And the way you do that is just by rotating this torso. So think about that. The other thing is, don't let the paddle go off vertical. Keep it as vertical as possible. I think you'll find plenty of stability and reserve stability in these boats. So you don't hesitate to reach over and paddle. Now don't throw your weight out of the boat or anything, you know, but reach out there. Bring this top arm over. Line that top arm up with this shoulder. In the real power racers and stuff, they're actually doing a cross-angle hatch like that. You know, they actually rotate all the way around and really drive it in. You don't have to do that. You don't really have to rotate at all if you don't want to. You know, go out there and have fun. But you will get more out of it the more you develop that rotation. On your exit, don't let the paddle come past your hips. Start thinking about taking the exit of the paddle at your hips. Either a J exit or a pry exit. Right? What I find is that I use about 3 to 1, 3 J's to 1 pry. The pry is the more powerful exit for more dramatic changes of direction, more dramatic correction strokes. The J is the faster and the smoother exit. So develop the J as much as possible, but don't hesitate to do a pry when you need it. All right? Gets the job done. All right?
How low do you drop your grip hand?
No lower than I need to. How's that?
Meaning it stays above your shoulder line.
I hadn't thought about that, and I need to do this in a boat, but I don't think it. I think it varies depending upon what I'm going to do next. Right? Watch out for rules. Yeah, don't let me or anybody else put a sharp rule on you, because there are a few basic strokes, and then everything else is a blend. You know, you're doing. My favorite word is nuance. Right, little nuances of the forward stroke. In a solo boat, on your entry, put the paddle in the water, a little bit of an angle and a little bit of a bow draw rather, as the paddle enters the water. Starts with a little correction stroke. Then as you take your forward stroke, the bow will go away from your paddle side. Then when you correct, it straightens up. If you do this smoothly enough, it's almost imperceptible. You know, a good paddler just looks like they're smoothly paddling across the water, even in a really hot, maneuverable boat. It goes straight. And a bad paddler gets in this boat and finds new directions to face all of a sudden. All right, everybody does that when they first get in an encore, so don't be embarrassed if you get in there and find yourself turning very quickly. It's what the boat was designed to do.
Recreational paddling versus slalom racing?
Paddle length. That is the biggest can of worms I know of. I'm a paddle manufacturer and designer too, and the only thing I'll say about paddle length is that all rules are wrong. There is no rule for paddle length. I studied classical guitar for a while and learned something pretty interesting. And that is that when you first go into a master class or something, the first thing that your teacher is going to do is look at your hands. Yeah, and I was told I'd never be able to play classical guitar because my ring fingers won't touch the pads of my hands. You know, I've got a little kink in my ring finger on both hands. So what it says is that's very common, but it pointed out to the fact that everybody's skeletal structure is different. No two people are alike. You know, these bones are longer and shorter on some people. These bones are longer and shorter torsos. Different skeletal structures, musculature, development, flexibility, and everything else. And what I say is that the rules that we have for paddle length are sort of ballpark rules. They get you started. All right? We try and give you a paddle to start off with that's neither too long nor too short, so you can go out and learn and get some use out of that paddle. And then as you develop, you should try different lengths until you find something that suits you. And don't hesitate to ask your coach if you're paddling too short or too long. So when people ask me what length paddle they should be using, I say, let's see you paddle. And then we can see, just by watching you, if the paddle you're using is too long or too short. In general, finishing up answering your question, the paddle that I use recreationally and the paddle that I race with is the same length. I don't necessarily think that that should be true in all cases, because I like to say I'm a boater and not a floater, so I paddle pretty hard recreationally. And I think it takes a more aggressive paddling style to use the longer paddles effectively. Right? You're taking away a little bit of your ability to react with the longer paddle. Shorter paddle, you can handle it better. You can recover better with the shorter paddle. What I usually do is put, for instance, average person, average bill, approximately 5'10" in height. A man would put them in approximately a 58-inch paddle to get started. Right? As they got better, I'd recommend that they try to go up as far as they could. I'm 5'10", I paddle a 59.5. Right? But I'd start you a little shorter. Right? There are other opinions on this. And listen to all of them, try to wade through the stuff and make your own decisions. Right? People that train for a race will do a couple of things. Sometimes you'll see them move up in paddle length as they try and peak physically for a given race. What I do when I'm not trying to sell canoes and have time to train is I use the same length, but I go to a larger blade as I try and peak for a particular race. And then as soon as that race is over, I get rid of that thing, because in a race you're trying to win and you're willing to sacrifice your muscles and some other things in order to win a race. You know, you start putting on a race and suddenly racers show up, and the object is to win. So you'll paddle with a very stiff paddle. You'll paddle with a hotter boat that you would have trouble running on a river. It wouldn't be very forgiving, but it's a boat that can give you a competitive advantage. So races are different. And the last word has certainly not been written on race technique. I think we'll see some evolution in that right on and on and on. All right? Did I beat that question to death? Okay. That's a long one. We could do 2 weeks of classroom work on paddle length alone. All right, anything else? Yeah. Well, let's see. I think that the real cause of that is just how the human body works. It's a science called kinesiology. And I taught canoeing to some kinesiologists a long time ago in the early 70s. And they weren't really interested in canoeing, although they had a good time, but they were more interested in what I was doing and how I was getting the paddle in position and taking the stroke and so on. And they were trying to do that and see how it worked. Out of this science, we now have computer modeling of the human body and how the human body works and how you can take a paddle stroke. It turns out that your musculature and the way those muscles are attached to your skeleton and so on give you the most power in the first 7 or 8 inches of your power stroke. In other words, from the time that paddle's in the water, your power is right there, 7 or 8 inches. And that's about 3/4 of all the power you have to give. Okay? So these long, languid paddle strokes are sort of a waste of time. They're kind of fun to do, and I don't recommend that you never do one, but when you really want efficiency, when you really need the power, put more strokes up in your peak power application position or something. I'm sure we could come up with a neat acronym for that. But in that 7 or 8 inches is where most of your power is. So what you would want to do is go to more strokes, quicker exit, quicker entry, and get in the power strokes up front. So it's just how the body works. And you're going to be using your body all the time, so the more you learn about that, and the more you try to look just like John Lugbill in a canoe. I mean, he looks the way he does paddling for a very good reason, and it's all physiological. Right? Yeah. Anything else?
Home repairs for ABS material?
Yeah, there are a number of them. My favorite one is still epoxy and S-glass. I use a modified epoxy to do my repairs. There are a number of kits that are available that are very good. Some of the two-part urethane repairs work very well, very flexible and resilient. Urethanes are very tricky to work with, though. You have to have very precise mixing and metering, and I'm not sure that's a good one for. I'm sorry? Yeah. Well, okay. There's a number of things, and we're seeing more all the time. But yes, you can certainly repair ABS. There's a boat that I got from another canoe company in 1979 that I paddled at the National Championships in '79 in Pulaski, New York. And I was doing a trip on the Chattooga River, left the boat overnight with the people I was taking down the river. River rose 8 feet during the night, washed that boat away, and punched a hemlock tree through the bottom of it. That was in '79. I patched that boat with epoxy and S-glass. That patch is still on that boat, and that boat is still in service right now. So there are a lot of very effective ways to patch ABS. There are some materials that canoes are being made out of that do not patch well, and that's polyethylene. It's very difficult to patch polyethylene. ABS is not a problem.
What are the functions of the vinyl ABS?
It has a couple of functions. One thing, it's much more abrasion resistant than the ABS itself. The other thing that it does is it blocks ultraviolet deterioration. You can see some pigmentation change in the vinyl skin, but you'll see very little degrade in the structural properties of it. There's some other molding considerations on it too. People are playing with other kinds of skins. I don't know if or when we'll see the other skins.
Turn towards the shore? Yeah. Okay. And down that way.
I'm a beginner!
I'll get into it. Do some demonstrations. What the difference
area and then drive up.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty easy.
Okay.
In the stern back there, you're going to have a little trouble driving forward because there are rocks in your way over there. They were put there for you. But that's hard out of my way to get to a rock.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I figure that's a 2-second advantage if you can get to a rock.
Want to say something about the run?
That brush is right in the wrong spot.
Yeah, we got hit pretty bad too.
Yeah.
look, 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 look.